I don't want to burst anyone's bubble here, so if you believe in haunted lost episode legends and enjoy living in that world, maybe this isn't the post for you. I mean, don't get me wrong, I hate it when people complain about lack of realism in entertainment. I think all kids need to believe in Santa and the Tooth Fairy as long as possible, but this is different. Back in the 80s, I met this dude, Sid, who used to cut old VHS tapes and stuff like that. It was more of a hobby for him. It was pretty much his entire life. His parents were a bit more wealthy than I'd been blessed with, so when we were teenagers and I was slaving away at Scats, yes, Scats, a fast food restaurant, he just hung out around the house cutting tapes all day, all night. Of course, as you get older, things in your past become a little bit clearer, and I think he might have been a little bit borderline autistic. Or maybe he was just a high-functioning person with Asperger's. But of course, I'm no expert, and I'm not saying that was the case. It's just the best and quickest way I can think of to explain his personality and obsession with cutting tapes and cutting tapes and cutting tapes. I believe it started when he saw Old Yeller as a kid. For whatever reason, his parents let him watch that. And if you're unfamiliar with it, it's the tale of a boy and his dog. I really hope I don't have to announce the spoiler on this one. But in the end, the boy has to shoot his own dog because it's rabid. Now, Sid didn't appreciate this. He didn't like this at all. Now, his dad photographed and videotaped weddings, so he showed Sid how to operate some of the machines, and Sid started cutting out and changing the ending, replacing it with an earlier, happier scene, as if Old Yeller just got suddenly better off screen. He watched the tape obsessively after that, even in his early teens when I first met him. He made me watch it just to show how he fixed it. And I can actually picture him as a little boy once he started applauding and cheering at his own faux ending. I don't want to say I was a bad influence, but after I saw what he did, I asked him if he could do that with other movies. My major interest was perhaps taking a film or two and cutting in some nude frames the actresses hadn't really done. Don't worry, though, I never had the guts to actually ask him. I just imagined how cool it would be. Often. Sid told me that, yes, he could fix any movie he wanted. In fact, he had done with a few others. He had a copy of Ghostbusters cartoon, and I shit you not, every ghost was completely removed. The story made no sense, there was no continuity. But he had accomplished it, and I was very impressed. I guess in the time of VHS, these things seemed more magical than they do nowadays. As time went by, I encouraged Sid to do more stuff and edit more movies, but with different purposes. Instead of whitewashing all the scary stuff like he wanted to do, I got him to see the light and how awesome he could make things. Somewhere out there, this chubby Star Wars nerd from our high school has all 3 original films flawlessly cut together. Edited sound effects that would have made George Lucas say, "Enough meddling." So we charged him like $20 for the only copy, because we're idiots. Anyway, this went on for a little while until I lost my interest in it. It was more of a goof for me than it was for him. This was the point where I started working, driving, taking bases with local girls. Well, he just got more and more involved in cutting those tapes. I think his favourites were cartoons. When The Simpsons came around, he spent apeshit of those. Now his edits weren't so much fixing things as just breaking them in interesting ways. Another thing that sticks out in my mind when he recorded an episode of MASH and cut it with a glory old war flick. Halfway through this version, the camp gets bombed, soldiers invade, everyone dies. and at the end he specifically worked in freeze frames of each cast member's face, eyes closed. He had completely reversed his interests and embraced what had once terrified him, scary endings. He seemed to love things like long, drawn-out sequences and terrifying silence. He'd make me be quiet while they played, too. You might have heard about this mysterious fellow named Banksy who goes around creating interesting graffiti and whatnot. At one point, he went into a music store and replaced some Paris Hilton CDs with his own fakes. Banksy had nothing on Sid. Every other week he'd tell me about some store or video rental place he'd snuck into and put some of his tapes. He'd swap them out for the real ones, and then he'd start all over by cutting the ones he'd stolen. At one point, when I hadn't been heard from him in a long while, I stopped by his parents' house and found him in the garage. He'd set up his own little movie studio there, complete with a drawing board. And at this point, he was actually animating entirely new content. All at once, I was both blown away by his artistic skill I'd never seen before, and very concerned about when this guy was going to come out of the dark and start acting normal, like me. He barely looked up from his drawings as we spoke. I asked him what any kid now in his late teens would do, and ask, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" Seriously, dude, this is some crazy shit. "It's work. I'm working. My work is just as important as anybody else's." "Are you even selling these anymore, or are you just sneaking them into places? How much is this costing your dad?" "I don't care." I looked at what he was so fervently illustrating. "Is that a headless body? Dancing?" "Yeah. That's pretty dark, man." "I know. That's the point." "I don't get it." "Those tapes. I thought they were wrong, but over time, I figured out the truth." "Which is?" "Scary stuff is right. The happy endings are a lie." He just kept drawing as I stood there. The silence was disturbing, and in that moment I could smell the BO coming off of him. It wasn't just sweat either. It was a mingling of that and foul-ass and piss-soaked cloth. I hate to say it, but I gave up on him. Right then. It's that moment when you look at someone you thought you knew, and all you can think is, holy shit, I never realized that they were this far gone. And it wasn't until my late 30s Sid crossed my mind again. I was pursuing the internet, just aimlessly wandering the web, when I came across a series of urban legends about strange VHS tapes, recut movies, lost episodes. And some of those I recognized. I'd watched them with Sid, or actually seen him in the middle of working them. Every disturbing scene, every unbelievable anecdote, I believed it, because I'd been there. Others, SpongeBob cartoons, episodes of iCarly or whatever, those shows came long after I'd made my break with Sid, but the style, the creepy, disturbing, strange style, was all too familiar. Even the ones that didn't sound like his work seemed like they could have been broken copies or attempts at mimicking his work. And he was still doing it. My God, it boggled my mind. I called up Sid's own number, not entirely sure I'd still find him there. It rang for minutes, and I know that the search was hopeless. Even if he did live with his parents, it wasn't likely they'd still be staying at the same house by now. Still, I made it a point to drive out to his old place, to see if he was in that garage, cutting tapes, manipulating them via a computer, or whatever he'd be up to. When I passed by the house, the unkept lawn was overgrown with waist-high weeds. the dilapidated facade of the building, with its peeling paint on the shutters, missing roof tiles, muck-filled gutters, told me no one had lived here for a very, very long time. I saw a note on the door, but couldn't read it from the road. Maybe it was someone I could use to locate Sid and see if he'd ever gotten the help I now realized I should have given him. Pulling into the driveway, my headlights illuminated the garage door. It was windowless, vandalized, with gangster tags of some traveling band of assholes. The note on the door, as one might expect, spoke of a certain bank now owning the property. It noted that trespassing was heavily discouraged, and that at a certain point, someone would be out to make sure that the house was winterized, or whatever the hell that was. As I walked back to the car, defeated, something was nagging me. I knew that Sid's parents kept a spare key under a false rock by the back stairs, basically by virtue of Sid locking us both out on several occasions, and sick curiosity got the best of me. When I found the key, a sense of cold, gnawing dread swirled in my stomach. Who would move out and leave everything in its place like this? The key was the most obvious thing, but the flower pots, lawn decorations, were still there. Sid's old, rusted-out Huffy bike was leaning against the house, and had created thick, rusty streaks along the aluminium sliding. I don't even know what I expected to find using the key. I entered the house, and the smell was overwhelming. Not a putrid smell, nothing rotten, decaying, just the smell of... I don't know if this would make any sense to you, but the smell of electricity, like burning dust on a light bulb, a heater giving to a particular warmed metal odor, something when like a piece of wire overheats. And that was the least of my concerns, however, as I saw everything just as I had left it. Everything Sid's family owned was frozen in time. The dining room table we'd sat at, on many occasions, was dust-covered, and supported an emaciated rat that had all but turned to dust. The television, that bulky, oversized television set we'd all walked around to watch Sid's tape and lauds its creativity. It sat there, where it had always been, silently displaying a violent bombardment of black and white static. As I moved through the rooms, the sense of panic and discomfort within me only grew. Every fibre of my being was screaming, shouting, "Run! Run, you fucking idiot!" And still, I pressed on into Sid's bedroom. It was now empty in disrepair. His prized action figures, blank videotapes, hundreds of videotapes, stale, water damaged. I almost wanted to call out to shout, "Sid!" and wait for him to appear as if nothing was out of the ordinary. I went into his bedroom, and there, lying in bed, were two motionless bodies, gaunt, grey, half turned to dust, just like the rat in the dining room. I could scarcely believe what I was seeing with my own eyes. Not only were two dead bodies slowly dissipating within the confines of this once idyllic suburban household, but nobody had ever checked up on them. Nobody had discovered this until now. My mind raced, my heart raced. The only things that wouldn't move were my feet, which remained glued to the spot. Sid, I thought, must have done this. There's no way that the two of them perfectly healthy people would just lie one night and simultaneously die of natural causes. Sid had said he didn't care about his parents, and when was the last time I had seen them? God, I hadn't seen them for days, weeks, before the last time I talked to Sid. When I finally left the room, I took out my cell phone and began dialing 911. However, as soon as I left it in my head, an ear-splitting shriek of interference nearly caused me to fling the object across the room. I rushed to the kitchen phone, squealing static. I tried the living room phone, just to be thorough. Static. And it wasn't until I put the receiver back down I heard it. Music. Faint, barely audible music that I hadn't noticed until now. It seemed to be some repeating melody. Happy. Light. Some flutes, maybe a whole horn section. I followed the peppy tune to the in-house door to the garage. Pressing my ear against the door's dirty surface, I determined that the music was indeed coming from just beyond. Sid? I called out, barely managing to form the name with cold, bloodless lips. Sid? Are you in there? Are you alright? I tried the door only to find it was somehow locked from the other side. No matter, since the one wild kick nearly knocked the rotting wood off its hinges. Sid! I shouted as the dust slowly cleared. And through the haze, I could see the light of a television screen, vibrant colors, blue, green, yellow. And I could make out a cartoon playing on the screen. And then the silver wires, running from the set itself to the dark mass in front of me. And then the dark mass took a shape as my eyes adjusted to the lighting. It was Sid, or rather his body, not nearly dead as long as his parents, seated in an old office chair. The wires from the television set led directly to his body, eventually disappearing into several old clustered over holes in his leathery flesh. Through a small worm-eaten opening in his ribs, I thought I could see more metal inside of him. I could walk to Sid's side, holding my hand over my mouth for fear of spewing up. His face was twisted into a hideous, wide grin. His empty eye sockets almost seemed happy, hooded by a pleased brow line. Hi there! I heard a jarring voice. The voice was upbeat, high-pitched. It almost sounded like Sid, but different, bubbly, cartoony. And I turned to the screen. The green grass, the blue sky, the yellow flowers, and Sid. A perfect caricature of him. It strolled along the infinite loop of that utopian cartoon background. And it waved to me. Sid, I whispered. Oh, God. Sid. He, the cartoon version of him, turned his attention away from me and continued to merrily stroll across that unending cycle of the same backdrop. He passed a shrub, then passed it again, and again. The same bluebird, chirping happily, flew through the sky in a figure eight. Sid. I shook my head, unable to comprehend the scenario. I never should have left you, and I never should have let you leave reality. I thought about what Sid had done to his mum and dad. I thought about how the bank would come over and soon see this, and all of it would come to light. I watched Sid walk along for nearly half an hour. And then I unplugged the set.